Welcome to the podcast, everyone, and welcome to 2025. He is the fabulous John Canzano at joncanzano.com. I am Jon Wilner at the Wilner Hotline, and we saw each other. That was last week, wasn't it? I'm having a little trouble with the calendar, but I thought we were going to see the best quarterfinal game of them all, and we saw the worst.
Yeah, we got a chance, rare opportunity. Spend some time together. I looked when I got to Pasadena and I got to the Rose Bowl. I looked on the seating chart, and there I was sitting right next to Jon Wilner on the seating chart. I was so happy about that. Settled in and watched this great football game, the first day of 2025, and they had a flyover. The fans were crowing crazy, and then all of a sudden, it was like watching one of the Super Bowls from like the 80s.
Yeah, 1 minute in, that game was over.
Done.
So should we start? We should review the quarterfinals here. Do you want to start there?
Let's start with the quarterfinal reaction. Well, all right, let's start with that Rose Bowl, man. Ohio State, 41-21, knockout win over Oregon. A lot of questions about the coaching at Oregon. I think that, we talked about this. Dan Lanning's got a great first punch. Like, if he's a fighter, he's got a great first punch. He hits first. He hits hard because he's got good players. But that first punch happened in Eugene in this matchup, and here these teams meet again. Chip Kelly had 4 quarters of being able to observe Oregon. He had all the film on Oregon. I think he embarrassed Tosh Lupoi in the Rose Bowl. I think it came down to coaching strategy and Ohio State having good players who were in good position to win.
Well, how are the Oregon fans taking that loss, given what the season was like, what the expectations were like? Oh, finally a chance to win the national title for Phil Knight, undefeated. I mean, they looked like the best team in the country for 3 months, and then they didn't just lose, right? They got demolished in a way that you could argue, I went through and looked, you could argue it's the worst loss anybody's ever had in the CFP, given Oregon's seed and the way it transpired. Are Oregon fans frustrated? Are they upset? What's the mood up there?
I think it was extreme disappointment and shock to start with. And because I was on the plane and watching all these Oregon fans as they were kind of making the trip down to Pasadena, they were already talking about the Cotton Bowl. They were talking about the national championship game. Would they go? If Oregon goes, do we go? They're making family decisions. And then all of a sudden it's over before it's over. Right. And so I think it was shock. I think it was disappointment. I think then it also was, gosh, this feels a lot like 2015 when Ezekiel Elliott and Cardale Jones, you remember Ohio State that year, they weren't the best team in the regular season that year. They just kind of caught lightning in a bottle. They promote Cardale Jones to quarterback, and all of a sudden they were a very different team in that championship game. And they did pretty much the same thing to Oregon, but maybe in a more decisive way, because I think there came a point in the first half, Wilner, that it was just like, will Oregon salvage any of what was going on, and will they get on the board? And then they scored late in the first half finally, and then a lot of questions.
I never thought there was a chance. Did you think that? I never thought Oregon had a chance once it was 34-0.
At 17-0, Oregon got possession, and I said must score, need points, because I couldn't imagine them coming back because Ohio State wasn't going to miss. Chip Kelly got the ball back; it was going to be 24. So. And then you could see, I think I turned to you too in the press box. I said, look at the body language. Oregon's defensive linemen had their hands on their hips in the first quarter. First quarter of the game. But my bigger takeaway as I'm driving away from the Rose Bowl, Wilner, was they have money. Okay. Oregon has resources. It has money. It has infrastructure. It's got the Division Street Collective. They need to take some of that money and they need to go out and find at least, you don't have to make them coordinators, but you need to get some guys on your staff that have got gray hair, who have been there before, dirt cutter types who know how to game plan, who know how to adjust. Oregon was bad in the third quarter this season. It was their worst quarter of any of those quarters. Good first punch, tough with adjustment, and they were bad the second time they played Ohio State. I just don't think that coaching staff is built to do more than recruit. And when we got better players, we can sure give you trouble. But when all things are equal and it comes down to coaching, I think Oregon got exploited.
Yeah, they did. I also thought they looked a little slow, little sluggish, which is exactly what you'd expect from a team that had been off for 24 days. And unlike previous Rose Bowls, their opponent wasn't off for 24 days. Ohio State looked, they were at fifth gear
Yeah.
On the first play, they're in fifth gear, and Oregon is in second gear. And, we saw that with all the quarterfinals, all the teams that had the byes lost. And I don't think that's the only reason, but clearly Oregon lost something during that 3.5-week break. And, they would have been better off losing the Big Ten championship game. There's no doubt about that. And it does suggest, and we'll get into the changes for the CFP in a few minutes, but certainly I was impressed that Lanning did not use the bye as an excuse. Good for him. But they did look sluggish.
Yeah, and I think if you asked coaches, if we gave you a blank calendar, how many days off would you want ideally? I think most coaches would say, give me like 9, 10, 11 days, like between games, because you stay in rhythm, you stay sharp, but it gives you a little extra rest, a little extra prep. And you look at the calendar, that's what it amounted to for Ohio State. As they got, they didn't play in the conference championship game. They come back in the first round. I think they had 10 days after that first round game to prep for Oregon. It wasn't like they were on a short week. This isn't like playing on a Friday night, traveling across time zones. Like, they had ample opportunity to get ready. They just looked sharper, better, primed. We'll get into that, of course, but all the teams that had the byes not only lost, Wilner, they just didn't look good in the first half.
No, they didn't.
Their games, even Arizona State struggling. Those cumulative first half totals were bad for those teams that had the time off.
They were, and it's not like, you could say, well, Arizona State, I think it was 14-3 at the end of the first quarter against Texas. Boise was down 14-0. Sure, they were big underdogs, but after the first quarter, after the first half, they played their opponents even, at least. So I think that was certainly played a role. I was so impressed with ASU. The way they fought back in that game. They were down 24-8, I think it was. And the most impressive aspect for ASU was they were more physical at the line of scrimmage than Texas's offensive line. ASU's defensive line really played well. And, Kenny Dillingham, he's done a great job assembling pieces, building the culture, but he's also got a tough team, right? Yeah. They were tough at the line. And they were tougher in the line than Oregon was against Ohio State. Ohio State was rushing. They were getting tons of pressure with rushing 4 or 5 guys. So, real credit to ASU for how they played, not only in that game, but the whole season.
Cam Scataboo. Come on. Is there a better, more inspired performance that you've seen this college football season than the way he was running around out there? And, he was given, at the end of plays, he was playing to the crowd a little bit. I just love watching that kid play.
Yeah. He even threw up. He was even throwing up on the sideline. You got to love it.
Get back in there. And then look, they got hosed. Arizona State got hosed. That was a targeting call. You look at all of the Dean Blandinos and the Tessitoris out there, all the people who are paid to do this are all in agreement that is targeting. Yep. I hate it. It makes me think about having a centralized officiating body again, because I can't help but wonder, the stakes for, an SEC team and the TV revenue and the money that's involved. And you've got an Arizona State team that is kind of the uninvited guest to the party. And I think they got a raw deal in that game. And I think that call was a huge call, would have changed the complexion of the game. Sad for Arizona State, frustrated for their players.
Well, they also got a bad call on Texas's punt return. There was a clear blindside block by the Longhorns that did not get called. So, real tough situation. And you could see, in real time, as soon as they announced that there was no targeting, you could see Dillingham's face and he's mouthing the words, "That's so bad," and it absolutely was. That was a Big Ten. We should be clear. That was a Big Ten officiating crew and a Big Ten replay official who actually had used to work in the Pac-12. So that was handled by the Big Ten and the Big Ten Command Center at the conference headquarters. It was not an SEC type deal, as many conspiracy theories as there are. But anyway you cut it, was bad.
There's still any hint of bias or impropriety, and the Big Ten and the SEC, we all know, are acting different than the
Yeah.
other. And it was like a have against a have not in that situation. And I didn't like it. And you made a really good point, I think, on social media. There was a lot of talk where some of the Texas fans are like, well, he didn't lead with the crown of his helmet. You don't have to lead with the crown of your helmet for it to be targeting.
Not in that case. So that's the biggest misconception among fans, and even some analysts don't understand. If it's a defenseless receiver, which is what Melkon Stovall was, you don't have to have crown of the helmet involved. It is forcible contact to the head or neck area. Now, if he is a runner, if he can defend himself and he is a runner, then the crown of the helmet is the rule that's used. But in that case, it did not have to be crown.
Yeah, targeting bad in general, but really, I think a bad interpretation, a bad call there. It cost ASU. Talking more about the quarterfinals, let's look at the TV ratings for the quarterfinals. Here we go. Rose Bowl, Oregon, Ohio State, 21.1 million. Peach Bowl, Sugar Bowl after that. The Fiesta Bowl, look, it was New Year's Eve. It's a 4:30 p.m. Pacific time kickoff. You got Boise State, Idaho, small market. You're still 13-8, very nice number. What jumps out to you there as you look at sort of the TV numbers, Wilner?
Well, the Rose is king. I mean, it was a quarterfinal and not a semifinal, and it was a blowout, and that's the biggest audience for any college football game this season. And the other thing that jumps out to me is $16 million for the Sugar, which was because of the tragedy in New Orleans. The Sugar was on Thursday, and a lot of people were back at work on Thursday, middle of the afternoon here, Pacific time. So I thought that was a really good number given the situation for the Sugar. 16 million, I should say. Real nice number.
Yeah, I look too at, people ask me that, was I surprised that the Boise State Penn State game got the lowest number? No, because you're talking about 7:30 on New Year's Eve Eastern time. Like, you're going to just get, you're messing with people's plans for New Year's Eve at that point. I also had people complaining that the games were all on ESPN and not available on ABC. Now, maybe that's a consideration moving forward, but I think the conferences that are getting money are just going to take the most available money, and the rights holders are going to get to do what they want with the games. But there were a lot of, how do I say this politely? There were a lot of older fans who were emailing me saying, how do I get this game? And I was tempted to tell them, sign up for FUBU and do a 1-week trial. But then it's like you're doing tech support for your dad and your mom, so it's just, if these games are on linear TV, I do think the numbers would be more impressive and really make a dent in the NFL. But what do you expect is going to happen kind of with this thing moving forward? Will they keep the New Year's Eve game and then the rest on New Year's Day, or what do you think?
I think they probably need to, just because it'd be hard to get 4 games in on New Year's Day, right? Just the time required for the games to be played and ESPN's shoulder programming. I think they'll probably end up with a game on New Year's Eve each year. More interesting to me is that there have been 8 playoff games played so far, and 2 of them have done much worse on the TV numbers than the other 6, right? The first 2 games on the Saturday of the opening round. So that was Penn State, SMU, and Texas, Clemson. Those did not do very well, and they were up against the NFL competition. So I look at that and think to myself, is ESPN going to want, which ESPN has the exclusive rights, are they going to want to add games? Are they going to want to go to 14 or 16? I'm not sure that there's any value in extra games for ESPN if you've already got 2 out of 8 that aren't measuring up, right? So maybe they add games, but ESPN says we're not paying you another dime for if you want to add them. But clearly those 2 that are up against the NFL got hit pretty hard.
Yeah, and I loved some of the comments as the CFP and the college football people are talking with Roger Goodell about how this is all going to work, and the NFL listened politely. That's what came out of there. But
the NFL is they are going. It's a steel cage match for that with them.
Yeah.
They are not happy that the college football playoff scheduled those opening round games on that Saturday, and they are taking no prisoners. And that's an unwinnable fight for the college football.
Let's talk about a little bit of this.
Okay.
Changes. So you kind of hit on one. There could be some bracket creep where they talk about going to 14 teams. Clearly, I think the Pacific Northwest fans who were watching Oregon believe that, look, you win your conference championship, you should be rewarded with something, not a 24-day layoff and then Ohio State on a neutral site. How about the first 2 rounds of this tournament being home games, taking the stress off fans, rewarding the higher seeded teams with multiple games at home, much like the NFL? How does that sit with you?
Sits great with me, but the question is, how's that going to sit with the Rose Bowl, Fiesta Bowl, Orange, Sugar, Peach, Cotton, right? The longtime bowl partners want to have big games. And if you moved the opening round and the quarterfinals to campus sites, then you've got 2 semifinals. You've got 6 major bowls, but only 2 semifinals. So college football would have to be willing to untether itself from its bowl partnerships in order to do that. I think they should. The other issue there is the calendar, right? I mean, if you wanted to try to move everything up, partly to get away from the NFL in January, you got to find another weekend to do that, right? You can't start the thing on December 20th if you want to finish up with the semifinals on New Year's or the championship on New Year's.
Yeah. I think reseeding has got to be on the table as well.
Oh, for sure.
Because, look, you can't give those first-round buys to the conference champions regardless. Maybe the conference champions should be rewarded with a home game. If they're a first-round participant, they get a home game de facto, right? You're a conference champ, you get a home game regardless of seeding. But how about, Oregon, the 1 seed should play the 12, 2 should play 11. How about nobody gets a bye? How about you just play it out and let this thing, given the time that, and the time off that you have available after the conference championship games, I think you could stay away from having to have games, played on a Friday or a Saturday. And you could even see a Thursday game. Like, let's go 1 versus 12, 11 versus 2, and really seed the teams 1 through 12, how they fall in the eyes of the committee.
I think there's no doubt that's going to happen. The question is when. And so for viewers, in order to make changes for next season's playoff, that has to be unanimous vote among the conferences. Starting with the 2026 season, you don't need the unanimity. The SEC and the Big Ten can pretty much do whatever they want.
That's what they've said. They've come out and said they believe they're in charge of the.
They believe they're in charge, along with ESPN. So any changes to the format, my guess is it would be in the 2026 season. I mean, why would the Group of 5 or the Big 12 or the ACC vote to have the seeds based strictly on ranking? Because the SEC and Big 10 are most likely going to have the highest ranked teams. We saw Boise State and ASU. They benefited in the seeding from having the current format. And so I'm not sure that we'll see a change before 2026 season. And then we're going to see a lot of them. We'll see changes to the ranking and seeding. We may see the home field situation get moved, but the SEC and the Big Ten are going to take control in 2 years and craft the playoff in a way that favors them the most. They might even put in the automatic bids, right? We may see the Big Ten and the SEC get 3 or 4 automatic bids, no matter what happens during the regular season.
I don't want that. I mean,
no?
I think one of the coolest things was, I was really interested in seeing Boise State play Penn State. And liked that. I even liked SMU, seeing SMU out there and seeing Arizona State out there, seeing some new teams. And it just felt interesting. And, I couldn't help but wonder, what if the reward for winning a conference championship was hosting that first round game instead of having a bye? And all of a sudden, Boise State, Penn State is on blue turf. There's some fun things that they could really look at that would be more like the NFL, because I think they have to, everybody knows they're trying to be the NFL, but they say they're not. But I think you got to lean into it. Like the NFL rewards those division winners, and they reward with the home field based on your record. And so why not do that with this playoff? And, I think Oregon would much rather have had a game at Autzen Stadium in the opening round.
Oh, sure.
And winning that conference championship and getting 24 days off.
Yeah. And it's not just the advantage you get on the field, get playing at home. Think about what a fundraising that opportunity that is for your university. Yeah. Think about all the marketing and promotion you can do for the entire campus. It's not just about football.
I want to pivot a little bit here.
Okay.
I'm going to throw a graphic up, and I want to see what you think about this. But, look, we've got odds to win the CFP. Ohio State, the favorite currently, and Texas, and then Notre Dame and Penn State coming as the long shots here. First of all, I give you $100 to bet, Wilner. How do you divide the money? Do you put 100 on Ohio State? Do you take a flyer on a Penn State or a Notre Dame? What do you do?
I would take your 100, then I'd go to my ATM and take another 400 out, put $500 on Ohio State. That's what I do. I think they are the best team, and it's not close when they're operating on all cylinders. And I don't know. I haven't seen enough from Texas either all season or against ASU to think they could hold up. I mean, that team we saw at the Rose Bowl was by far the best team, and they got the best player. Jeremiah Smith cannot be defended with one guy. And then if you put two on him, Ohio State's got all these other weapons.
Yeah. Let's pivot to the semifinal games, and we'll start with the Orange Bowl, Thursday, 4:30 on ESPN. Penn State, Notre Dame. Look, I think Penn State's evolved in the last month, particularly on offense. And I suspect that Penn State wants a rematch with Ohio State. But I just don't trust James Franklin in a big game, and this is a huge game. Marcus Freeman, Notre Dame, I think he's the better coach. I think it gives them an advantage. I think his team is organized. I think they're efficient and they're physical. But most of all, they know who they are. I'm not sure Penn State, even at this point of the season, knows who it is. This is going to be a tug of war. The game's in the 20s, but I like Notre Dame, something like 24-21. How about you?
Well, my head says Penn State and my gut says Notre Dame. I do think that Penn State's got an advantage with the preparation, right? They played on New Year's Eve, and Notre Dame had to play on January 2nd because of the delay in the Sugar Bowl. That's a big difference in prep time, 2 days. So I think all things being equal, I think Notre Dame is the better team, but I could certainly see Penn State winning. I think Notre Dame is a 2-point favorite.
Yeah.
I would probably give the points against my better judgment, but it should be a great game. Very similar teams.
Yeah. I feel like Penn State turned a corner late in the year, and I don't think this is the same Penn State offense that struggled against Ohio State early, in this season. And I think the Nittany Lions would love another shot at Ohio State. And so
that Big Ten championship turned out it was not a fluke the way Oregon's defense played.
Yeah, yeah. And I, it's funny because Oregon was celebrating, and I can remember after that game, they gave up a bazillion rushing yards to Penn State. Tosh Lupoi was the one guy who wasn't smiling and jumping around. He was standing back, had his arms folded. You could tell he was happy they won the game, but he was not happy with the way his defense played. And so, it ended up being a precursor or foreshadowing of what happened in the Rose Bowl. How about the Cotton Bowl, Ohio State, Texas? I think we both like Ohio State.
I certainly do. Texas gave up 500 yards to Arizona State, and now they're playing the best offense in the country. And I don't know about Quinn Ewers, right? He's, to me, I would have much more confidence in Will Howard making plays than I would in Quinn Ewers making plays.
Yeah, I feel the same way. And then I'll go one further. I just think there's a coaching mismatch here again. If there was a mismatch last week, I like Sark. I don't love Sark in these big games, and he's proven it a couple of times. And it even goes back to last year when Washington beat him in the 4-team playoff. He hasn't been great in these big games, and I think Chip Kelly, Ryan Day, there's just a lot of experience and expertise on that Ohio State staff. I think they're going to exploit Texas. Down year for the SEC. For everybody who was crying about strength of schedule and SEC needed more teams in, I think we're going to get another reminder in that Cotton Bowl that the SEC just didn't have a great season. Can we talk for a second about Arizona State before we put to rest the?
I think we need to do that.
Okay.
Sleeping Giant
again. Yeah, because that was the narrative at Arizona State for years in the Pac-12.
Decades.
Oh, if they only could put it together, if they only could get the guy. Do they have the guy in Kenny Dillingham who has finally awakened the sleeping giant?
Well, they certainly have the guy. My question is whether he can keep the giant awake, right? That's the issue. Sustaining is really hard. I mean, they're going to have a struggle next year. I think that they'll be a good team, but it's going to be a struggle. It's never going to be like it was this season when they came out of nowhere. There's no pressure. The chemistry is perfect. You're just riding it, kind of like what we saw with Arizona last season, 2023. But I do think Dillingham's the right guy long term. I mean, he bleeds ASU. He went there. He grew up there. He knows what it takes to succeed there. But sustained high-level success is going to be tough.
Yeah, he's got Sam Levitt at quarterback, who, West Linn high school kid from the state of Oregon. Nobody's surprised, in my region that he had success there. But Cam Scadaboo, can you find another Cam Scadaboo? Like, how hard is it to get that guy? I thought it was really interesting after, they lose to Texas. The athletic director comes out and says, hey, we got to find the money. And it was such a strong message about keeping the giant awake because they know everybody's going to be revenue sharing. Everybody's talking about sharing the maximum. We don't know if everybody's going to be able to do it. But Arizona State's got to find the money and get Kenny Dillingham enough. As he said, give the man his money. Get him, you got to get enough there to kind of keep those programs and keep that program alive and vibrant.
He certainly, he did a fantastic job. They were 3-9 last season. And he got Scadaboo to me. Sam Levitt was really good, but Scadaboo was more than just, their star offensive player. He embodied so much of what they were about and the way they played. And it'll be interesting to watch who, if anyone, assumes that role for them next year. Maybe it's Levitt, but that was a big part of it. Just the grit that they had. And, we've had Dillingham on. He was on with us on the podcast in November. And it's hard not to get energized when he's talking, right?
Yeah.
And who's going to kind of take what he is selling to the team and embody it on the field?
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up because there's a little bit of that at play over the years at Oregon. Because, you may remember Oregon suddenly started getting access to better talent after Chip Kelly and getting to the national title game. And they started getting 4- and 5-star guys. They never had a bunch of 4- and 5-star guys. And all of a sudden, though, those 4- and 5-star guys who were wowed by the uniforms and the facilities, they didn't have grit. They weren't the same gritty guys. And so Kenny Dillingham's got to keep the Scadaboo, kind of the grit of the program, while recognizing he's going to have access to some recruits and some living rooms that he never had access to before. It's a very interesting balance, and you have to be very careful with it because if you get it wrong, suddenly you lose your identity and you lose your culture.
You do, and you're in a conference in which there's so much parity that teams can rise and fall. We saw that with ASU and BYU and Colorado this year. Teams can rise and fall on a year-to-year basis, and that's what makes the Big 12 so entertaining, and it creates such opportunity, but it also makes it a little bit fraught because nobody has a significant advantage over anybody. There's no Ohio States, right? There's no Georgias, so just the whole dynamic within that conference kind of creates opportunity, but also treachery.
Yeah, you got thin margins there.
Margins.
You bring a nice segue here into like the congruency of vision that you need with your trustees, your president, your athletic director, your head football coach.
I know where you're going with this.
That alignment.
I know where you're going.
That alignment. It does not exist at Washington State right now. They've got problems from trustee to president to AD. There's a disconnect in that relationship that they are not aligned. It is so hard to win in college football if you're not aligned. And now you've got issues. I wrote about it on Christmas Eve, where you've got the regents ordering the president to give the athletic director $2 million. Go find it. Turns out the number ends up around $4.5 million after matching and a foundation gift. Ann McCoy, the AD, says the president never told her. She found out from the regents in an email. Kirk Schultz, the president, told me, look, he didn't really have a good explanation for why he dragged his feet. I think he's mad that Jake Dickert, his football coach, circumvented him and tried to go to the regents to get the money. Didn't really want to reward the guy for doing that. I mean, there was like a code red issued here. You can't win when that's happening. Then you come with this piece that dovetailed so beautifully with what I wrote, because you start writing about, hey, their new football coach and what they're paying him.
Yeah, they're not paying him very much, are they? It's like 1.5, 1.6 million a year on average for Jimmy Rogers. And that, if you project out to what the Pac-12 will be like in 2026, Washington State's coach, based on the salaries right now, he would be second lowest paid coach in the conference. And that sends a huge message about what Washington State plans to be in this new era. Now, a week later, word comes out from Ann McCoy, the athletic director, who she told the Spokesman Review there's a $4.5 million salary pool for the assistant coaches and coordinators. Now, that is higher than I would have expected. And if you're a Washington State fan, you should take heart in that salary pool. That's a pretty good number if it's used right. So you kind of got bad news with Rogers' salary, but good news with the assistant coaches pool. Not quite sure what to make out of it, but if you're a Cougar fan, you got to be a little nervous about what the overall commitment's going to be. And I don't think that there's a lack of motivation or willpower on Ann McCoy's part.
Yeah.
But above her, where's the willpower?
Yeah, the regents are on board. I talked to the regent. I talked to several regents, quoted one of them. They understand that they need to boost enrollment on their campus. So one of their prime objectives is to get more high school kids to say, I want to go to Washington State. Well, I had one of the regents tell me, we know that the brand in football boosts enrollment. So an investment in football is going to, give the brand of Washington State a boost. So the regents get it. And now they're in final interviews for this president that they're going to hire. And they seem to understand that they need to get a president who is on board with athletics. So I think that's promising. They said, we have to get this right. That was one of the quotes I got from the regents. We have to get this right. And so if they get it right, I do think Ann McCoy is doing everything right. She's pointed in the right direction. But if you put the wrong president in that alignment, you've got problems. And it'll be an untenable position for her to be in. So this is a critical hire for them. The regents have to get this right. President has to understand where athletics fit in the mission. And then Washington State, I think, will be okay at that point. But it's nice to see that salary pool is not going to shrink. It's one of the reasons Jake Dickert left. As part of that piece I wrote on Christmas Eve, there was this contentious meeting between Kirk Schultz, the president, and Jake Dickert, the football coach, that happened, in early November, where, Washington State's 8-1. Dickert's they're in the hunt for the CFP. And he's got his university president telling him, I'm not afraid to be the university president who right sizes athletics. That no president in the country is talking that way. And so I think I can't help but wonder how distracting that was for the coaching staff. We look at WSU was not the same in the last 3 weeks of the season. And I have to think that played a role.
Yep. I'm sure it did. And I thought, you're spot on about the enrollment. That is a big deal for the university's finances at large. Yeah. And enrollment for out-of-state students who pay full cost tuition is just plummeted since the late 2010s. And that's a factor. We will see what happens up there. Yeah. But if you just took an imaginary $10 million and you had two choices, one is to put that money into football, hiring coaches, doing what you can, recruiting to improve your football program, and you took that $10 million and you gave it to a marketing agency to say, hey, use that money to try to market Washington State. Which is a better use of that $10 million? The
Come
football
on.
team,
The football
of
team.
course.
Yeah.
So,
And the regents are saying that. I was surprised. I was a little surprised to hear that. But I had multiple regents tell me that they know that an investment in football will help boost the brand and enrollment. And, there are other factors, sure. But I think Kirk Schultz is worried about his legacy, and he doesn't want to be viewed as the pro sports guy on the way out. And he doesn't understand when you're a lame duck, you're supposed to be irresponsible. You're supposed to be spending money like a drunken sailor. You're not supposed to be worried about, who's getting the bill for this. Just go all in on football and call it good. But I think he's really fortunate that he doesn't have more time left on his deal with Washington State. I think the regents would be talking about removing him if not.
Yeah, and he's scheduled to go through, what is it, June 30th, I think?
Yeah.
We'll see if he stays till then. If they hire somebody soon, who knows? It could be a quicker transition.
They may make a move. I had one source tell me that the regents were having conversations about what to do about him in the final months of his deal. So let's pivot here to one prediction for 2025. Okay, one fearless prediction. And then
you got one?
I'd love this, though, before you go. I would love our viewers who are watching us on YouTube in particular to, in the comments, give their own one prediction for 2025.
Yep.
Let's see what comes true. But
we will read those in our next episode. That's a great idea.
Yeah.
You got one? If you got one, go ahead.
Okay. Fearless prediction for 2025. I think without a doubt, you're going to see banging of the shoe on the table by the SEC saying they need more access to the playoff, that this was a one-year blip, that that this playoff format isn't really working for the SEC. I think you're going to conversely see the Big Ten say, there's nothing wrong with this. We're doing great. We've got everything's working out just fine for us. But I think belly aching and whining from the SEC, and by extension of that, ESPN. That is one fearless prediction. Fearless prediction number 2.
Oh, you got 2. All right.
Huge bounce back season for Oregon State. Have you seen what they're doing in the portal? You could talk about cute culture and good coaching, and oh gosh, we're picking kids that, we've got kids that really believe in what we're doing. Nonsense. There's something going on with the NIL collective damnation. There's something happening there because they are bringing guys in. They get the quarterback from Duke. They got a tight end from Miami. They've retained their players that they wanted. Something hinky going on with the damnation collective in Oregon State, because this is not about culture. Kids are not picking schools for culture anymore. They're putting money on the palms of the hands of some players.
It's funny how everything swings, right? Washington State, Oregon State, great advantages. All right, so I'll go with a couple. One is no changes to the CFP for next season.
Ooh, okay.
I think that we're 2 years from that. I'm also going to predict USC fires Lincoln Riley
Whoa.
after next season.
Wow.
Let me amend that. Next season is Lincoln Riley's last at USC. Maybe he leaves on his own, but I think that's going to be it. It's not working. It's not working, and the fact that he is now working for an athletic director who didn't hire him, and he will soon be working for a president who did not hire him, I think just adds to. I don't want to know if it's a disconnect, but it's just not right. And so this is going to be it. He's got 12 games left as a USC coach.
Wow, they'd still probably owe him like north of $70 million.
A lot of money.
I just don't. I guess they'll find it if you're unhappy enough. You find that kind of money.
Well, or he finds an out and escape clause on his own, goes somewhere else. I just think it's not working.
Maybe he's had enough. All right, I want everybody who is watching this on YouTube, make a commitment to us. Hit that subscribe button. Make sure you don't miss a thing. Leave us your fearless prediction for 2025 in the comment section. Love to get those. We'll obviously be back with an all-new episode coming up next week. I'm Jon Canzano. You can read me at joncanzano.com. He's Jon Wilner. Find him at wilnerhotline.com. Thanks, everybody, and have a great 2025.
Thanks so much.